All right, I think we are about ready to begin. I want to say good morning and good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast. I want to thank everybody who's attending. We have another great turnout for our latest webinar in the NIMBL lecture series, Your Guide to Embedded Analytics with S/4HANA. I'm Jake Eisbart, part of the marketing team here. A little bit about us here at NIMBL. We are SAP technologists and SAP ecosystem thought leaders. Our consulting business, which is 50% of our work, delivers SAP projects, both technical and functional. And our Denver-based SAP managed service supports both Fortune 1000 and Midmarket 24/7 across 20-plus skill sets. Here are a list of some of the services that we offer. Obviously, today we'll be talking in combination of S/4HANA and analytics. And here are some of the customers that we work with. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. We want to be able to answer as many questions as possible. So if you take a look at the bottom left-hand corner, the chat box or the chat bubble, feel free to ask any questions during the presentation, and they will be addressed at the end. So a little bit about our speaker today. Our speaker is Marcelo Berger. He is an SAP Analytics Architect at NIMBL here in Denver, Colorado, with a background in BW, Business Objects, and CDS programming. He is a frequent blogger in the SAP community, and his most recent projects also include architecting and deploying S/4HANA Embedded Analytics per this webinar. And right before we get to him, we want to get a little bit of lay of the land in terms of analytics. So we're going to give you a couple poll questions. The first is your company currently using analytics? And you see the answers. Yes, we're using BW only. Yes, we're using BW and BobJ. We are using BW and third party. We are using something other than what's listed, or we are not currently using analytics. And I'll give people a little bit of time to fill that out. Looks like most of you are using BW and BobJ. All right, give people a couple more seconds. And all right, on to our next poll question. What is your current S/4HANA schedule? Because I know a lot of people are moving to S/4HANA. Some people are currently reviewing it. Others are looking for a system integrator. Most people need more information on it, and some are not looking into it at this point. So as always, I'm going to give people a little bit of time to fill this out. It looks like most people need a little bit more information or are currently reviewing it. And in our experience here at NIMBL, that's pretty much split 50-50 with a lot of our people. All right, great. Then at this point, I'm going to hand the lecture over to Marcelo. Marcelo, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. So very pleased to see that many of you do use BW today and Business Objects. So a lot of what we're going to be covering today will seem very similar to that existing architecture. So in this session, we're going to talk about S/4 Embedded Analytics using the virtual data model. This is going to be mainly a live demo session, so you can see how these things all come together. So we're going to create a simple virtual data model using CDS views. We'll show you what CDS views are and that they are the basis to the architecture for that virtual data model. And then I'll briefly demonstrate how once we build that virtual data model, we can consume that data in pretty much all of your business object tools today. So I'm going to briefly demonstrate Webby, Analysis for Office, Lumira Discovery, and unfortunately Analytics Cloud, I will not be showing it to you. Our connection right now to our S4 environment is not working since we just moved offices, but we did have that set up, and we can also connect Analytics Cloud to your S4 system and consume your CDS views. So moving along, what's our agenda? Before we go into the live demo, I'll briefly talk about what the analytics landscape are, what's your S4 embedded analytics, what are the front-end tools that we'll be covering, and then we'll go into that live demo into HANA Studio, creating those CDS views in the virtual data model, and creating some very simple visualizations with the tools that I just mentioned before. So let's go ahead and talk briefly about what does analytics look like today in SAP's world. So to put it simply, this is SAP's vision. This is where they are technically with the software. But if you want to be on the latest and greatest, you would have your SAP S/4HANA for your transactions, and you would have your BW for HANA for your strategic analytics. And all of this is obviously sitting on your HANA platform, and then you can pick and choose between the two systems depending on what your reporting needs are. So operational reporting, you now have the option of your embedded analytics within your S4 system. For more strategic analysis or even some predictive analytics, you can use now your BW for HANA, which has been, BW for HANA has been rewritten from the ground up. So SAP says that they've removed 1 million lines of code from their previous BW 7.5 version. So it's supposed to be a very streamlined BW environment. So this is the lay of the land right now, where SAP wants your customers or wants customers to go to. So let's talk about embedded analytics a bit. Let me give you a primer on how all this works. So S4 embedded analytics. The main premise here is that we have virtual data models. And as we progress here, for most of you who have an existing BW environment, you will see that translates fairly nicely to what you have in a BW environment in terms of just the general architecture. The difference being is that when I say a virtual data model, we're no longer persisting data. We are reading data real time directly out of the S4 environment. So with those virtual data models, you're looking directly on the tables, and then you can build a ton of different applications on top of it. May it be using the suite of business object tools or Analytics Cloud or Fiori or different front-end tools. At the same time, we can also connect the CDS views to a BW system and use that as a data source. So it can be used twofold for reporting, for analytics, as well as a data source to a BW system. If we move along to the next slide, this is the high-level architecture. So how does this work? So at the very bottom, you have persistency. What does that mean? These are your tables. These are your tables in your S4 system. May it be the simplified general ledger table, which is your AC DACA, or your MARA table for your material master, your shipping documents, billing, deliveries, all of those tables, they are physically existing in your S4 system. So then we go up to modeling. So now we build the CDS views, and we build that virtual data modeling in order to consume the raw data and for us to add semantics to it and add properties and make sure that we're satisfying user requirements. What is the access method? We then can have an OData service, which will then expose this to your Fiori or other third-party tools, or we have what we call this transient analytical queries. Again, for those of you who have BW systems, this will translate to pretty much a BEX query. That's how that CDS view will behave. The front-end tools will see that as a BEX query. So then finally, your visualization. This is where we consume the data. Your end user will consume that data, and that will be, again, your BobJ front-end tools, Analytics Cloud, Fiori, or a third-party system. So now let's talk briefly about the virtual data model. What is a virtual data model? Plain and simply, it's a bunch of views, what we call our CDS views, and we build them layered on top of each other. So we build a first view, which is then consumed by a second view, which is then consumed by a third view. Again, the architecture of your virtual data model will depend on your requirements. It's not a straightforward linear view on top of a view on top of a view. It just depends on what it is you need to build. Finally, you have your UI at the top, which is, again, your front-end tool, which will consume those views. So what does a virtual data model look? Again, for those of you who have a BW system, this will look very similar to the architecture in BW, where we load the data into a DSO or an ODS. Typically, you would have a cube for a second layer, and then you would have a multi-provider or a composite provider, and then finally your BEX query. So those elements translate on the right side here of my screen. You would have a basic CDS view, which is pretty much your initial select of data out of your tables in S4. Once you do that, you build a composite view, which selects data from that basic view, and this is where we add all of the semantics. So this is where we define properties such as we're adding text or attributes to a particular field, such as material. And again, I'll demonstrate this when we go through the live demo. And then on top of the composite view, we have the consumption view. The consumption view would be akin to your BEX query, which is where we're pretty much building that query that will be exposed to the front-end tools, and it will behave like a BEX query. You can even run this in RSRT, and you can do data previews and test if the query is working. Apart from that, on the left-hand side, we have our master data. So this is, again, similar to BW, where you build your dimension and you build your text views, and then we put them together, and then we associate them to a composite view. So this looks, again, this is a virtual data model. All this is happening real time when the user executes that report, as opposed to BW, when we have to load data into the DSOs, the cubes, and the data is persisted. It exists physically in BW, and you have that overhead of your extraction, your ETL, into BW, as well as data and memory that's being consumed by that persisted data. So moving along, these views that we're talking about, these are CDS views, so they stand for Core Data Services. And pretty much the definition is that they are semantically enriched, non-persistent entities that can be built on top of each other, and they're executed during runtime. All right, so for those of you, again, you have SAP, you have ECC in your environments, you're probably familiar with SE11, where you can build a view on top of tables. It's pretty much the same principle with CDS views, but they are way more advanced and sophisticated, and you have a lot of additional functionality in there as compared to your old SE11 views. So here, this is really just a screenshot of what a CDS view looks like. I will walk you through some live examples in the upcoming minutes. So briefly, let's talk about the front-end tools. Most of you here do have business objects, or at least half of you have business objects. So this is an SAP diagram in terms of where they see the front-end tools going. So they have at the bottom, part in green with Innovate at the core. It's pretty much your on-premise tools. Again, they have their BI suites, so Lumira, Design Studio, Analysis for Office, Webby, and Crystal Reports. You have your planning tools going forward, as well as you have now predictive analytics. And now when you go to Cloud Solution, this is an actually outdated screenshot because it says SAP Business Objects Cloud. That has been rebranded. It's Analytics Cloud. So that is the Cloud tool, which is a completely new tool that was, again, built from the bottom up. And even though we don't have the connection right now, I'll quickly show you what that looks like. And with Business and with Analytics Cloud, you also have the option for the digital boardroom, which is a tool that allows for touch screen, multiple TVs in the room with reports in there where you can have meetings and literally drill down into the data as the meeting is happening. So in terms of the on-premise tools, we have Web Intelligence here on the right, Analysis for Office, which is your ad hoc reporting. It looks like Excel. You got pretty much a pivot table on steroids with your data coming out of either your data warehouse or S4. Lots of many of the financial users really like to use Analysis for Office just because it's in Excel and then they can manipulate the data as they please. And then you have Lumira Discovery, which is the latest version of Lumira, which is Lumira 2.0, where you can have lots of visualizations and graphs and charts. It's more of a storytelling tool as opposed to an ad hoc tool. It's a visualization tool. And then finally on the cloud, you have Analytics Cloud. This is just a standard SAP delivered template just to demonstrate the tool, but it looks pretty slick, and it's actually really, really easy to create visualizations using the tool. So let's get right to it. Let's go to the live demo. So first of all, let me just share my screen over here. So first things first, I'm going to be logging into our S4 environment just to demonstrate to you a few things in here. So let me just show to you that we have an S4 system in here. So we're currently on Simple Finance 1605, where I think we're planning on upgrading it to 1709, which is upcoming and shortly. So the one thing I want to show you, I've built a couple of CDS views that I'm going to demonstrate. One of them is based on the Simple Finance table, which is the AC DACA table. So this consolidates about 10 to 20 existing tables in ECC. And I just want to show you that right now we have about 45 million records in here. And when we run reports, just notice the performance for very summarized report data. So right now, 45 million records in the AC DACA. It's all dummy data. This is just our lab environment. So nothing really meaningful in terms of just the data content. So like I mentioned before, we have an architecture. So the first CDS view that we build is our basic view. Our basic view is a view where we're actually selecting data from our physical table. So right over here, you can see that I am selecting it from the AC DACA table, which I just showed you. And if I click on it, I can actually see what are the properties of the table. So my keys, my fields, my data elements, the descriptions, and so forth. These blue things here with the @ symbol, these are what we call annotations. The annotations that precede a line apply to that line. So the key things just to see here is that this view is a basic view and it's a fact. So it's emulating a fact table. So when I do my initial select, I'm really not applying any semantics to it. I'm only selecting the data. I am renaming it to give a more meaningful name as opposed to the traditional German names that they give. And that's it. I've selected all of the data here that I want from my AC DACA table. I can do a quick data preview to see what's coming out. So I will just hit the F8 button. And it's just fetching my first 100 rows, but here you go. This is my data. It looks pretty all right to me at a glance. So I will close this here. And the one thing I forgot to mention, I am in HANA Studio. I am in the ABAP perspective here on the right side. And I'm already in my demo package. You can see here that I'm connected to ECD, which is the system I just showed to you. So if I move up in the layers here of my virtual data model, I now build, and you can see here also, before I do that, I have a naming convention that makes it easy for me to note. So BF would be basic and fact. If I move next in my layer, I see here that I'm now I'll look at my view type and my category. It's a composite and a cube. So here I'm emulating what would be in BW pretty much a composite or a multi-provider. The naming convention here, it's again ZCC, just because I'm taking the initials of these two, so it's just for easy identification. And if you look at this now, I am selecting data from my previous view, the ZBF. We'll get to these associations in a moment. Here you can see now that I have some additional things going on in this view. I have these annotations, which are now applying to the individual fields. So again, remembering that if the annotation is on top of a field, it applies to the field directly underneath it. So here I have many annotations. You can also see that I have some functions that I'm using. So I'm using a concatenation function just to concatenate your fiscal year and your period into a single field. I have some case statements, which are pretty much your if-else statements. So simple logic in here that we can add to a CDS view. And again, other case statements. We can also have formulas. We can have hard-coded values. There's a lot of functionality that we can have in here. I'm not demonstrating everything that we can do, but just some main things. And here's where we also add, again, semantics. So here I am defining that this field is a currency by using this annotation, saying semantics currency code true. Likewise, for unit of measure, I am defining that this unit is a unit of measure. What this allows me to do, again, if you're familiar with BW, you can then link a currency or a unit of measure to a specific key field or measure. And this is what I'm effectively doing if I go now here to my measures at the bottom. All that I am saying here is that for this field, this amount in transaction currency, the currency code that applies to it is this transaction currency. Where this comes into play is in the front-end tools. When you display this data in, for example, analysis for Office, it'll bring the corresponding currency code next to the value. Likewise, we have some other annotations here for the measures. So here I'm specifying how do I want this measure to aggregate. I want it to be a sum. I want it to sum it. I have other functions or other values that I can use. I maybe want it to be a maximum or a minimum or a count or an average. So this is where I specify the behavior of that measure. And then likewise, I have this other annotation here, which simply gives me the name of the field or the end user label, what the user will see when he runs this report. So I just want it to be revenue and TRS curve, revenue and transaction currency. Over here you can see I just have some formulas, so you can see that we can have formulas in here also. And let me go to the very top now. I said I would come back to this here. So now I have associations. So this is where I am telling this particular view that I want to look at these, pretty much these master data objects. What all of these things are, all of these fields here are pretty much dimensions. So if I actually go into this I material, as you can see here, this is another CDS view, but it is of type dimension. So this is our dimension view, which is pretty much bringing attributes and text from our material master, so from our Mara table. So by building this dimension view and then associating it to my composite view, I am now saying, hey, bring all this material master data and text and associate it to this composite provider. So this is going to behave exactly like a BEX query when if you want to drill into your attributes, you have that function available. And the reason this is good is because I can have this iMaterial built once, this material dimension built once, and I can reutilize this thing in all my different composite CDS views that I build. So it's reusability of the tool. You're probably all familiar with how an ABAP program works in SE38, where once you build that program is self-contained, meaning that if I want to bring attributes of material master, I have to, in that SE38 program, create a select to Mara and bring the corresponding fields. And if you now have 20 programs, 20 ABAP programs that all need material, you have to do that select 20 times. Here, you only have to do the association to iMaterial or to your dimension view in the composite provider. So you build it once and it gets reutilized multiple times. And the way you do it, again, is this association. I then have this pretty much, let me just go to material. Where is my material? Here's my material. So now I'm simply associating the field material to that material dimension. And once I bring that material dimension into here, the text and the attributes will all come for the ride when I build my consumption view, which is the next layer in the virtual data model. So now that I have my composite provider, I've added semantics to it. I can now build queries. So if I go in the next layer of my virtual data model, the naming convention here is going to be exactly the same as my composite view, but I've added a Q001. I have a BW background, so we're kind of used to building BEX queries and having the multi-provider name be the starting of the technical name, and we add the Q001 for all the different queries that we build. So this is just the naming convention. As you can see here, I am selecting from the composite provider that I just built before. And another thing here, an important thing to see here, the virtual data model type is a consumption view, so pretty much it's a query. And the very key thing here is that this analytics query true annotation is there. By having this annotation in there, this will behave like a BEX query, and it will have the OLAP manager driving its execution. I can also run this consumption view, the CDS view, in RSRT to test it out. So here, all that I am doing is I am adding the fields that I want for my output. And one thing that we can do, which I will show you, is we can add filters or prompts or parameters, variables, however you want to call them, just like in BEX queries. So right now I have it commented in here, but I can have filters in there. So let me quickly show you how I can run this here in RSRT. So I'll take the SQL name here at the top, and I'll copy this, and I'll add a 2 and a C to the start, and I will hit enter. And when I execute this thing, there you go. So the first thing to note is that I just ran a virtual data model on top of a table that has 45 million records, and it took me roughly 5 seconds for it to execute. So all the data is here. I can now test and see in the back end if everything that I've built is actually working correctly. So the thing about S/4HANA and performance is that if you build a report, just like I did, at a summarized level, or very aggregated data, it will run super fast, just like you saw it execute right now. But if I now build a report on top of those 45 million records and I start drilling down into the very detailed level, you're going to start to have a little bit of a performance hit. So it really depends on the what you're doing in your virtual data models, how many tables you are joining and putting together, and whatever logic you're doing in there. If you're going back over a year, over a day, over a month, all of these things will impact the performance of your reports, okay? I just wanted to show you one more thing here, because I showed you in my previous example just to select on a single table. As you can see in this other example, this other CDS view, which is a basic and a fact, here I'm selecting from now multiple tables. So from the VBAC table, and I'm doing joins onto other tables. So pretty much this is my sales header table, joining it to sales item table, and then to the sales item status table. So you can do, again, just join just like you would do in an SE38 program. So now that I've showed you the back end, I'll show you how to quickly consume this data in your front-end tools. So I'll start off using analysis for Excel, so analysis for Office. So I'm opening analysis, and the first thing I will do is once this opens, I will go here to the Analysis tab, and I'm going to insert a data source. So I'm not going to build very complex visualizations. I really just want to show you all how you can consume that one consumption CDS view in multiple front-end tools. So right now I don't have my business objects connected through the CMC, so I'm literally just going to connect to SAP directly. So this is our NIMBL ECD environment, and I'll just log in with my NIMBL credentials to ECC or to S4. So right now, let me just show you one more thing here. So right now I have this in my Z demo package. If I double click on this package, you will see that I do not have an application component assigned to it. So when I search for this report, it will show under the unassigned nodes. So that's why I'm going to go here to the bottom. So now you can see that here's my composite view. As you saw before in the consumption provided, it added 2C to the technical name to it. So I'll expand this here. And this was our query that we had initially. So I'll just click on it. It's going to read the data. It's going to bring the summarized view first. And again, as you saw, this was 45 million records that took about 5 seconds to run. So I have a quick visualization in here. I can start dragging and dropping fields into my pivot table or my analysis here, and you can build your report. Here's that concatenated field that I had initially. I'm just going to bring it in here just to show how this actually performs pretty well when doing that. So there you go. It just expanded the data. So this is how you can consume in analysis for Office, that consumption view. So now I'll go ahead and go into Lumira. So this is Lumira Discovery. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a BW connection. Again, remember that consumption view is behaving like a BEX query. So that's why we go through this BW connection. We have two options here, the live and import. Live will fetch the data real time from S4 every time. Import will actually import your data into the Lumira server. The key differences with these two is that import obviously is not real time, and you do get some additional functionality within Lumira for that. Again, the point of this webinar is not to show the functionality here of Lumira, so I just wanted to give you a brief explanation of what those two were. So I will connect to our SAP BW environment. So again, I'll come here to our NIMBL ECD, our client, and my password. So now I'm going to go here to my info areas again, and it should show up under unassigned. Lumira has a slight overhead in terms of just pulling the initial data in there. But now we can see here our unassigned nodes, my AC DACA composite, and the two queries that I have. So I'll just select this query. Hold on. All right, so there it is. So now this is just my starting off template. I'm just going to change this to be a column chart. I'm just going to drag my field I need here, and let's do this by fiscal year. So I've now built a quick visualization with, again, that same consumption view that I had before. I can build many others with this here by simply inserting a chart. I want to maybe have a pie chart, and I can click over here, and now we can start adding other fields in there. Here, let me just try with a this guy, and let's look at a customer group. All right, so there's very little meaningful data in there. Again, this is dummy data in our system, but just illustrating that we can create multiple visualizations using the same consumption view. So finally, let me just quickly show you how I can consume this data in Webby. Let me just refresh here. So I'm going to build a brand new Webby report. I'm just going to let that load. So this just takes a while for the applet to load. So now I'll click here on New. Again, this will be a BEX query. I already have my system set up in the CMC. So I'll just simply expand this connection. Go to my unassigned node, then we will see these guys again here, our composite views. You're going to notice that they also show up similarly to the composite view in BW, and the queries actually look like the queries, like a BEX query. So now I'll just build this here really quick. So here are all my objects. So I'm just going to select a few objects to build this initial report over here. Just a few dimensions and a few measures, and I'm going to run this. So while that refreshes, so there you go. Here's my data. Again, the same consumption view, consuming that in multiple different tools for whatever different reporting purposes you need. The one last thing here, let me show you one last thing here. So I was talking about the filter, so I'm just going to uncomment this guy. So I'm pretty much just adding a prompt or a filter or a variable to the fiscal year, right? So I just want it to be, mandatory, and I can have multiple selections. So I'm going to reactivate this CDS view. So it's just doing a syntax check, and we're good to go. So if I quickly show you here in the back end, I should now have a prompt that shows up. So there you go. Now my fiscal year shows up, so I can filter this. It's mandatory. So I'll just run this. All right, so if I now look at the data by fiscal year, I should only have it for 1 year. If I redo this report here in Analysis for Office, I should now have a prompt show up. So one of the main benefits of building these virtual data models as compared to a typical BW environment, there is no loading. We can make changes on the fly. So if, for example, I no longer need my posting date in there, I can simply remove this. I don't have to reload data from ECC all the way to BW or delete and reload. It's a simple change. I've removed it. I re-execute it, and the data will be reflected in the final consumption view. So that's a huge advantage of these virtual data models. So I'm just going to add again that query in here just to show you that the change that I did worked. And I'm just going to make this a little quicker. Let me just go here. All right, so there it is. As you can see, we now have the prompt show up here for the fiscal year. So I'll just run that. And there you go. Same report. It has been filtered. It works as expected. So this is consuming your consumption views in the on-premise tools. Again, unfortunately, I don't have the ECD connection to our cloud environment currently working, but I just wanted to quickly show you what the Analytics Cloud tool looks like. And the very simple example here I'm going to show you, so we would come here and we go to Browse, and we build stories. And I'm just going to show you I'm using data from a flat file that I imported for one of our customers. And you can see here, it's a very simple tool. We can build these very nice visualizations in there. The other very cool thing that this tool offers is that we can build a specific visualization type that will be readily available to be consumed in your mobile applications. So if I quickly show you this other story here for mobile, it's a different, you build it differently, but once I build it using this mobile template, once I download the Analytics app on my iPhone or my iPad or whatever device you have, this data can be consumed in your device. There's no setup, there's no overhead. You build it here using the format, and you log in using your credentials, and it's readily available. So this is another advantage of the Analytics Cloud tool. The other cool thing also, as I have it here, I have some notifications showing up. Because it's a cloud system and it's supported by SAP, every 2 weeks it gets updated. And so you don't have to worry about infrastructure, about having a basis team taking care of this. They automatically, every 2 weeks, update the system with new functionality, and they have release notes which you can go in and read to see, what are the new updates. So it's pretty cool in that sense. It's very little overhead from a maintenance perspective. So there you have it. So this was a live demo. Let me return to my slide deck. So we've covered the virtual data models and we've covered the visualizations. So then the next question that comes up is, what about embedded BW in S/4HANA? So there are very specific use cases for embedded BW. The SAP's recommendation, which is what's highlighted in, I guess that's orange or slight orange in there, is that you do not want to use embedded BW as your EDW, your enterprise data warehouse. That's not what S4 is for. That's not what embedded BW is for. There are specific use cases which call for it. But if you want to have an EDW, you should go for a separate approach using either BW for HANA or any of the other BW tools that SAP offers. So the recommendation here in terms of best practice is that the amount of data persisted in the embedded BW system should not exceed 20% of the overall data volume of that system. So if you are considering that, stick to these best practices. So what are the key takeaways from today's session? So you can have real-time operational reporting within S4, so with no ETL. So again, we're building those virtual data models, and the virtual data models are reading the data directly off of the S4 tables, and you can have real-time reporting. So we have clients where we've implemented embedded analytics for them, and they're doing exactly that. The performance has been terrific, and they've been really, really impressed and pleased with the overall outcome of how the reporting is being done, as well as the flexibility of building these virtual data models. The other thing here is that embedded analytics does not remove the use case for BW for HANA or for a BW system overall. Again, we have those, if you want to do strategic reporting with lots of data volume, with year over year with lots of detailed information, not aggregated data, BW for HANA might be a better candidate for that. You might not get the performance you would think doing this out of S4 HANA, just because this is happening real time. That's going through that virtual data model as the user executes it. And if you're going through millions and millions and millions of records and displaying that at a very detailed level, it can take time. It can be a data hog, and it take time. Third thing is agile development of a virtual data model. Building these virtual data models is fast. If you have the users in a room together with technical people who understand the table relationships, and you put these two people together with a CDS view developer, you can build a skeleton of a virtual data model in a couple of hours. Of course, you need to build all the semantics and refine all the requirements, but we can build these virtual data models pretty quickly if we have all the right people in the room. Because of that, we have a fast time to market for operational reports. So we build a virtual data model. Building the front-end report is usually the less complex task out of this architecture. And then finally, you have many reporting tools available for your diverse reporting needs. So I showed you all Webby, Analytics Cloud, Lemira, you have Analytics Cloud. So depending on what you're trying to accomplish, you're going to have the right tool to display the data that you've built in that virtual data model. So at this moment, I'll head it back to Jake.
All right, thanks, Marcel. Just a couple poll questions before we get to the Q&A. Based on this and everything else you've heard about embedded analytics, are you considering using embedded analytics for your reporting needs? Looks like a number of you are a definite yes. All right. Give it a couple more seconds. And then finally, Marcel mentioned analytics in the cloud as well. Are you or your company currently considering S/4HANA Cloud, which is, we do a lot of different webinars on S4HC, and as well as our newsletter, presentations across the country. In addition to that, I know a number of you have already done so, but I mentioned in the chat box that if you would like to receive our quarterly S4HANA newsletter where we cover analytics, upgrades, updates, on cloud versus on-prem, and your roadmap, overall roadmap to S4, just type S4 into the chat box, and we will make sure that you receive that quarterly newsletter. All right, looks like everybody's done with the poll questions. We do have a number of questions, so let's get to those right now. First question is from Prabhu. Can you export data out of S4HANA into a SQL server using data services?
So the short answer is yes. I mean, HANA is just a database, right? So you should be able to connect your data services to an S4 environment where you can then create your data services flow to pull the data out. So this is something I have never done, but I can't see why you would not be able to do that using data services.
All right, we'll get to the next question. Apologies for not mentioning this before, but a number of you have asked. Yes, everybody will be receiving a fully edited copy of this webinar within the next 48 hours. So if you had to step out for a second or miss something, don't worry about it. Everybody will be receiving a fully edited copy. Next question is from Ravi. Is there an automatic text association for a dimension in the CDS view, like BW info objects associated with text?
So there is no automatic creation. So similar to BW, there is some content that has been delivered by SAP. So for example, the I material that I was showing you all, that is something that has been delivered by SAP. So let me quickly share my screen again just to answer this question here. If I show you here this I material, so what you will see is that the way SAP did it and the way that we do it too is they built this I material text CDS views. If I click on it, you're going to see that it's pulling data from the MAKT, which is the text table. So the way the way this works in the CDS view world, you do have to build a text CDS view, and then you provide the proper semantics to the field. So you identify that this field here, for example, is its text field. And then if I go back to iMaterial, I then do an association to that CDS view. And then when I go here to the material, you're going to see that here it is a text association. So this is telling, by using these annotations, it's telling that it is a text field. And then if I go to here, I can actually show you this. If I actually bring the material into my report, it's going to behave just like you would expect a material to behave in BW, where I can display key and text. So because of all those associations, the text association that came first, I then built the dimension for a material, and then I associated that material to my composite provider. It will behave the way you would expect in a BW or a BEX environment. So I don't know if that answered your question. There is no automatic way. You still have to do it yourself. And pretty much what I did in a previous client of mine was they had a lot of material classification fields where they had keys and text, and there was no standard CDS view content available for those. So I had to go ahead and build all of those text and dimensions views first. But again, once they're built, they're there and they're ready and they're reusable, and they can be reused anywhere. So you might have an initial effort at the start of your project, but once all those objects are built, then you're good to go.
All right, thanks. We have a follow-up question from Prabhu. We only have S4 runtime license. We only have an S4 runtime license with no access to the HANA database. Will we still be able to create SDS views in the HANA Studio?
So unfortunately, I'm not a licensed person, so we can take that to our experts here in the house who understand everything about licensing, who can answer that question correctly. I don't want to give you.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we follow up with that. And in addition to that, any questions that we don't answer by the end of the webinar, we'll have Marcelo or one of our other leads follow up on that. All right, next question is from Matthew. Do you have to type the script to create a basic fact view yourself, or is it generated for you?
Yeah, so we have to type this. As of right now, the version we are on HANA 1.0. We actually come in here and we do have to type. I mean, there are some shortcuts to add fields in there, but you do type all of this in. The good news is that as of HANA 2.0, the CDS views become, you have the option to build them graphically. So meaning that it's a drag and drop interface where you drag a table, you click on the buttons to the field that you want, and you do the joins from one table to another, very similar to what a calculation view is in HANA also. So what you're seeing right here in front of your screen is everything that well, not in front of my screen because I'm not displaying right now, but all the CDS views that I showed, they were all manually typed in. They were not automatically generated.
All right. Alan asks, cubes consumed in pivot tables are great, but what's the appropriate approach and tool for showing 500 rows of master data? As an example, a dimension with 30 columns.
So my going in assumption is that sometimes we have reports where users want a data dump of rows of, 10,000 or more rows. And, my question is to them is, how do you analyze 10,000 rows of data in a report? 500 rows, of master data doesn't seem too high of a number. It's really, with that amount of records, it comes down to more of a preference in terms of end users. How would they prefer to see their data? So if they're looking at a tabular view of data, meaning it's data in the table, Analysis for Office is a great tool. I mean, that's what it's for. You can use even Webby or even Lumira, although I wouldn't recommend it, just because Lumira is more of a visualization tool. But I 500 rows doesn't really concern me. It's when you start getting to the thousands of rows, how do you effectively analyze that much data in a table? So I would say Analysis for Office or Webby would be two good tools for that.
All right, Robbie has, I believe it's a follow-up question to what he had asked before about potentially automatic text association. Maybe not. He asks, do we need a BW client in S4 for this? If so, will that BW client NW version or B4H version?
Yeah, so you have to have NetWeaver to be able to run these ABAP CDS views. So not necessarily, if I'm understanding your question, I think that's what you're asking for. But yeah, as long as you have the latest NetWeaver in your S4 environment, then you should be good to go with CDS views.
All right, and one of the final questions, if we don't have any more at this point, is any documentation on analytics specific to CDS views, the CDS view list, including dimensions, text, basic components, etc.
Yeah, there is documentation on that. As usual, SAP doesn't make it easy to find, but we can provide the links to that in our follow-up to you all.
All right, unless we have any other questions, I want to say thank you so much, Marcelo, for the presentation. As I mentioned before, everybody will be receiving a fully edited copy. And here is information on our speaker. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out. Again, this one will be on the edited version as well. As you exit, you will be taken to a comment page. We would love to hear your thoughts, what you liked, what you'd like to see us cover in the future. Our webinar series is very robust, from S4HANA to Soulman 7.2, S4HANA Cloud, Analytics, UX, everything. And again, what you thought of the overall presentation. On that, I want to thank everybody for joining us. This will be our last webinar of 2017. So with that, I want to wish everybody the happiest of holidays and a great 2018, and we look forward to everybody joining us for our 2018 NIMBL lecture series. Thank you so much.